All right, so let's get going on today's class. So just so that you know a little bit about kind of like the logistics of the slides that are going up and the Excel sheets that are going up. In Canvas, in the files, I will post the lecture slides that I'm going to be using so that you have access to those so you don't have to take furious notes. You can go back and revisit those later on. Also in there, I will put Excel sheets, such as the one that we're going to be using today in class when we introduce some of the Excel formulas. So they are labeled according to the week and the class number that they correspond to. So it'll be W something C1 or 2. So today's files and today's Excel sheet is W01C2 for week 1, class number 2. So that's how they're organized so that you know how to navigate those. And they correspond with what's covered in the schedule and the syllabus. All right, and in addition, I loaded a module into Canvas that will link you directly to my YouTube channel where you can find the playlists. And you will find a new playlist there that has one lecture uploaded for the last class, as well as previous versions of this class that were uploaded from semesters prior. So that's a very nice resource to use if you want to work ahead, if you're struggling with a pretest, if you're having trouble with material we haven't covered yet. You can check the previous semesters and maybe get a little bit of help with that from the uploaded lectures. So that's available now in Canvas as well. All right, so introduction to statistics. Today we are going to start covering chapter 1. But before we get to that, before we get to the new math that you're going to learn, so today we're going to learn all the new math that you're going to need for this course. We're going to start off with the MyLab overview. Then we're going to introduce the first piece of new math, which is summation notation. And then we're going to introduce the second piece of new math, which is a tweak to the order of operations. And that'll be all the math that you need to learn for this course. But before that, let's get to the MyLab overview. So the MyLab online solution, this is what we're going to be using for the majority of this course. The majority of your assignments, your pre-tests, your post-tests will all be done through MyLab. If you ever do not find an assignment listed in MyLab, that means that it's an Excel homework assignment, for example, and that'll be available for you in Canvas, and those are actually available to you right now. So you can access it through the home or the modules, and it has all the places where you can go for your quizzes and tests, for your homework, for your Pearson e-text. It's your one-stop for all the resources for this course. And when you get in there, get familiar with the layout, kind of poke around, check things out, see what it's all about, know how to navigate things. So it will give you a timeline for when things are available. It will give you a timeline for when things are due. When your next assignment is due, you can view all assignments. It'll track your progress. So it really can help you map out your schedule on this particular for this particular course. So as I said, everything is available right now. So all assignments are available. Again, if you want to work ahead, feel free. But just be aware of those dates when they're due. So it'll also tell you when things are coming up, when things are due. So for example, this is not this semester, but things were available on Monday, and some of the practice stuff was due on Tuesday. And the way that it works is, again, it's an online kind of homework solution. And one of the things I like about it is that it gives you immediate feedback. So you can try things, and it will immediately let you know, yes, you did it correct, no, you did it incorrect. So when you put in your answers, you can check them, and it will tell you, whether you got things right, whether you got things wrong. And that kind of instant feedback I find is very helpful, especially when you're developing these new skills. In addition to that, it will point you towards where you can find the correct information. So for example, here, it goes at least one of your answers is incorrect or you have not selected all that apply, remember that the median is preferred to the mean in highly skewed distribution. So it'll let you know kind of a hint, a little help along the way so that you can, again, get that learning done, get that practice in, and progress, develop your skills, grow your abilities so that we can do statistics. So we have homework coming up that's coming up due. The first couple of homework assignments are just a sort of, let's get our mindset and let's get introduced to MyLab. So the first one is on the, it's not on statistics specifically, but it's a great kind of mindset to try to develop. And that's the idea of developing a growth mindset rather than having a fixed mindset. So there's a short YouTube video that is linked in the, this is a Canvas assignment, so this is available in Canvas. So watch the video by Monday, September 2nd, answer the one question confirming that you watched the video. And do note that most assignments, about 90% of them, and it's only when the assignments are due right before an exam that this will be different, but most assignments are due midnight the day before classes. So we're going to meet on Tuesday, September 3rd. This is due Monday, September 2nd by midnight. And also included in that first homework assignment is a MyMathLab tutorial. So this is just a short video kind of introducing you to some of the features of MyMathLab or MyStatLab. They're used interchangeably. So if you've never used the MyLab series of tools before, and even if you had, this is going to be a very good resource to make sure that you are taking advantage of and benefiting from this as much as you possibly can. So in terms of the criteria, not the criteria, in terms of the types of tests and what you can do with the tests, this slide here has the settings, that's the word I was looking for. This slide here has the settings that you have for your homework assignments, for example. And the big thing that I want to point out is you have unlimited number of attempts per question. So I have the option to limit the number of times you can try each question. I decided not to. And really this is to encourage you to try it again, right? So if you get it wrong, it's not that you can't do it, it's you can't do it yet. So go back in and give it another go. And if you get it wrong again, go back in and give it another go. And keep doing that until you get it right. There's no penalty for multiple trials. So do give yourself a little bit of extra time. This homework might take longer for some than for others. So give yourself that ability to, make those mistakes and then know that it's not going to impact your grade. Try it again. Go over it one more time. You have that option there, unlimited trials for your homework. All right, and then the first pretest is also going to be due Monday, September 2nd. Technically, it should have been due for today, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on board and we're all ready to go. So we pushed it back a little bit, but typically you will read the chapter and do the pretest before we cover the material in class. Just a little bit different once we're getting into it. And for your pretests and your post-tests, also want to let you know that you can get partial credit on questions with multiple parts. So even if you can't get the whole thing, you will get points for getting part of the answer correct. And then also you have, you do have unlimited attempts. So once again, the option there to limit attempts is not checked. So you have unlimited attempts for your pretests. So if you get it wrong, try it again. If you get it wrong, try it again. If you get it wrong, feel free to try it again. And then also, you do have the save for later option, so you can leave and return to complete the test later. So you don't have to do it in a single sitting. You don't have to get it done in one shot. You can save it, come back, and continue on with your pretest. All right, so the last thing I want to mention about the MyLab is it's very important to know your due dates. So MyLab is an automated system. One of the reasons that I really like it is because it grades things automatically at the due date. So once the due date passes, that's it, it's graded, and it cannot be reopened for you to do that again. So for the pre-test and the post-test, once the due date passes, it's graded, it's done, we can't reopen it. For the homework, once the due date passes, you will lose 20% per day for any uncompleted work. So you'll get full points for what you've completed, but anything uncompleted that you come back to later, you'll lose 20%. So why lose 20%? The due dates are there. They're all readily available in the syllabus, in MyLab, multiple points. So make sure that you're aware of your due dates. I'm really hoping not to go through an entire semester where I don't get that email about, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened, I missed my due date. This is part of your responsibility as a student in this class. Know your due dates, be aware of it. And I understand that sometimes you might get busy. That's why all of the assignments are available right now so that you can plan your semester ahead so that you don't run into those issues. But very important, know your due dates. All right, so what we're going to talk about now is we're going to continue our look at statistics and talk a little bit about ninjas. All right, so if you are a fan of G.I. Joe, you know who this guy is. This is Snake Eyes. This is one of their, part of their ninja force. And if you know anything about G.I. Joe, you know that when things look hopeless, when things are at their hardest, when the mission has gone south and everything is going wrong, or when you have a task that is so complicated, so complex, that nobody else has a chance, that's when you send in Snake Eyes. That's when you send in this G.I. Joe operative, and he'll go in there and he'll get the job done. And the metaphor that I like to use for a statistician is they're like the ninjas in their department. So if you understand statistics and you have a grasp in these skills that we're teaching you today, when you go work in a psychology clinical institution, when you go to grad school, when you go work in a research lab, when you go anywhere in psychology, you will be the ninja of your team if you develop your statistical skills. And by far, our Snake Eyes in this psychology department is Dr. Fujita. And when I get data and I look at it and I think to myself, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with this. This is some weird stuff. I'm not sure if my statistical tests are appropriate for this pattern of data. I know exactly whose door I'm knocking on. It's going to be Dr. Fujita's, and sure enough, he's going to say, here's your solution. So that's what we're trying to get to, right? That's the image I want you to have in your mind. Statisticians are like ninjas. And you might have thought, when you were signing up for this course, what it was that you were going to get in store for. So when people usually think of statistics and psychology together, usually when I talk to students, they're saying to themselves, oh, you know, this is probably going to be about, we're going to take a look at data, we're going to take a look at psychology studies, and we're going to analyze it to see, you know, what the data says about psychology issues and psychology, you know, theories. And that is what we're going to get to, all right? So that is the cool stuff that you can do once you develop these skills, once you become that sort of ninja status. Is it? It's coming? There it is. All right. So we will be doing those cool things that you have envisioned in your mind. We will be doing those things in psychology that are just so indispensable. Okay, so let's start off with the first video here. All right, so this is what it's going to be like. This is what you might have envisioned. This is actually what it's like, at least for most of us. This is what stats is like, all right? So we are going to do the cool things, all right? We are going to do the cool test. Remember, you need to practice everything that we're doing because you want to get to the point where we can use stats to do all the cool stuff. So you want that to be you, all right? Ability to do a t-test, ability to do a NOVA. Don't be this guy, not enough practice. Don't be that guy, forgot how to you know, the formulas in Excel. But we will eventually do all of the kind of super cool things that you probably thought statistics was going to be all about. We're going to be doing all of this high-flying t-tests and ANOVAs and sword fights. Oh yeah, there we go. All right, so we will make it there. All right, and I promise we will make it there, but we are not quite there yet. You don't get to jump off buildings quite at this stage. Where we are at this stage is where the Karate Kid was. So if you've never seen the Karate Kid, I'm going to make you aware of this movie today. You're welcome. You should check it out. But this is what I want you to keep in mind as we go through this semester. So as you go through this semester, as you go on your journey, as we're working towards all those super cool skills, I want you to remember that you are now in the role of Daniel, and I am now going to be in the role of Mr. Miyagi. So this, in case you don't know, Daniel's being bullied. Mr. Miyagi tells him that he can teach him karate, and this is supposed to be Daniel's first lesson.
Walk on the road. Walk right side, safe. Walk left side, safe. Walk middle. Sooner or later, get the squeeze just like grape. Here karate, same thing. Either you karate do yes, or karate do no. You karate do yes so. Just like grape.
All right, so that's the first important point I want to drive home. Statistics, a lot like karate. That's why I use this example. That's why this is going to be the roadmap for your journey in this course. Statistics is a lot like karate. You do statistics, yes. You commit to the process. You do the pre-test. You do the post-test. You do the in-class practice. You do the homework. You're going to be successful in this class. Again, I have people of varying skills ending up with A+ in this class because they follow the program. Use statistics, do no, completely fine. If after today you say to yourself, you know what, I think I'll drop this course, I'll sign up for another course, instead I'll do statistics later, that's totally fine, right? You're on your own sort of trajectory. I can totally understand that. Use statistics, do so-so. If you stay in this class, but you just kind of do the pre-test, if you stay in this class and you do only half of the homework, you will have a difficult go of it, and at the end of it, you are not going to be pleased with the result, and you're just going to reaffirm that fixed mindset of, well, I guess I just wasn't a math person, that's why I failed. So commit to the process, or don't commit to the process, I'm fine either way, but if you do stay in this class, which I hope you do, make sure that you do statistics and not do statistics so-so.
Understand? Yeah, I understand. Now ready?
No, ready.
Yes. Must make a sacred act. I promise teach karate after my heart. You promise learn. I say you do. No question. That's your part.
All right, so that's a little bit different. I encourage questions. Do what I say to do, though, but feel free to ask as many questions as you need.
You
Still.
first wash all the car, then you wax. Wax. Remember, dear, no question.
Yeah, but I.
Wax on right hand, wax off left hand, wax on, wax off. Breathe into nose, out the mouth. Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important. Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off.
Hey, where these guys come from?
Wax on. Detroit. Wax off. Wax on. Right hand, next circle. Wax off. Left hand, circle.
Okay, so that last little scene there is also very important. In this class, I will tell you how to do things a certain way. And while you're completely free to do the things in your own way, and I totally understand that, I do this because I find that it works the best. So occasionally, like actually this morning, I will tell you about how to do certain things. It'll be my recommendations for you. If you think, yeah, that makes sense to me, feel free to do it that way. If not, then feel free to do it your own way. But I am trying to give you the skills and the foreshadowing to sort of be able to do things the right way. So when we are doing statistics, especially in the beginning, it's not going to look like statistics. It might not look like what you envisioned. Just the same way that waxing cars didn't look like karate to Daniel, this might not look like statistics, the stuff that we're doing at the beginning. So just to put your minds at ease, we will get to the super cool parts. We will get to the parts where we're looking at data that is like actual data from actual psychology experiments and using it to answer the important questions in psychology, free of bias, free of human error. But we're not quite there yet. We still got to work through developing a lot of these fundamental skills. So we're going to do a lot of waxing on and waxing off in the beginning. We're going to do a lot of sanding the floor in the beginning. We're going to do a lot of painting the fence in the beginning. We're going to do a lot of that, painting the fence in the beginning. And this is all built into the course. So for any kind of skill that we're going to be developing, we got pretests that we need to do. So you're going to be doing pretests on and pretests off. You're going to be doing in-class practice on, such as today. You're going to be doing extra practice is going to be available today. You're going to be doing homework assignments. You're going to be doing post-tests. You're going to be doing homework assignments. You're going to be doing a lot of repetition of the same things over and over and over again. And the reason we're doing this, just to give you the insight on what the plan is, the reason we're doing this is because through this repetition, things will become automatic. And people that are good at highly complicated skills, highly complex chains of behavior, they're not good because they're any different from any of us. They're good because they've taken those basic skills and they've made them automatic. And that's what all this repetition is going to be for. So hopefully what this does and what it's designed to do and what we'll probably get with this embedded video here is what we're working towards. We're working towards getting these skills automatic. So in this scene right here, Daniel gets frustrated. He's been working for days. He's been painting walls, and he's been sanding floors, and he's been waxing cars, and he hasn't been learning any karate to his mind. So finally he gets angry at Mr. Miyagi. Finally he comes to confront him. And yes, we have this scene here. When it works, it's so nice.
Show me wax on, wax on. Show me impotence.
All right, so notice the moves are automatic now. If you try to punch him in the face and Daniel had to think of, okay, I'm going to raise my arm, I'm going to block him that way, done, it's over. The moves are automatic. That's what we need to get to for the more complicated statistics we're going to be doing in the second half of this course. We need you to have those moves automatic so that when a complex chain comes, you don't have to think of the pieces. So this is going to be hypothesis testing right here. All right, it's a complicated sequence. You put in the practice now, when we get to that sequence, it's going to be automatic. So keep this in mind as we go through. This is your journey. This is the path that you're on. And I will get you to the finish. I will get you to your final exam, even further than that, after this, your advanced lab as well. And instead of that being that scary advanced lab, you're going to have your automatic skills. You're going to punch it in the face, kick it in the face, And then this is going to be you at the end of the class. This is going to be me at the end of the class. And everybody's going to be satisfied, walking out of here happy, and you'll be wondering, why was I ever worried about statistics? All right, but it starts here. It starts with the practice. It starts with stuff that might not feel like statistics, might not look like statistics. And always keep in mind that final goal. We are going to be getting to the skills that answer the very important questions in psychology, but we're not there yet. We're right here, right now, and that's why we got to do all of that practice. So let's start with that practice, and we're going to start with our first piece of new math, which is the statistical notation. All right, so statistical notation. Thankfully, statistics uses a lot of the same mathematic symbols that you've used before. So addition, subtraction, division, it uses all that notation. But it also has some specialized notation. It's got some stuff that's specific to statistics. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the capital X. And capital X, and if you run out of X's, capital Y, and if you run out of Y's, capital Z, and if you run out of Z's, you start at W and you work your way back. But these capital letters, especially capital X, they represent all the scores you have for a particular variable. So we have, looks like about 20-ish people in this class. I could ask you all what your height is. And I would have 20 scores in terms of height, right? So 5'2", 6'1", all the way down to the 20th score. All right, 5 foot, let's go with 11, right? I would have a whole bunch of scores. All of these scores, all 20 of them in statistics can be represented just by X. So that X stands for all of the scores. It stands for the entire set of scores that you're dealing with. And if I measured your, the size of your Netflix streaming queue, I could put all of those scores. Some of you might have 100 shows, some of you might have 2 shows. If you're like me, some of you might have like 300 shows queued up. And I will put those in Y. So this capital X stands for all of the scores. It stands for all of your raw scores. Here's my first recommendation. All right, here's my first, make sure you're waxing on like this, make sure you're waxing off like this recommendation. When you see symbols in this course, read it out fully rather than reading out the symbol. So when and I'll do this in the lectures as well, when I talk about this, today because we're introducing it, I'll mention it as X, but I'll always also mention it as the scores. So when you're reading your chapter, for example, when you're reading your homework, don't read this as X. Read this as the scores. And what that's going to do is you're going to practice reading it as the scores. You're going to practice reading it as the scores. You're going to practice reading it as the scores. And that has meaning to our minds, right? The scores mean something to us. It means all of the scores. And what that'll do is when you get to your, for example, exam, and you see this symbol on a question, you're going to read it as the scores. And you'll say to yourself, okay, I know what that is. It's the scores. On the other hand, if you continually read it as X, 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 when you get to the exam, it's going to mean X. And X is meaningless. X doesn't stand for anything. So when you go through, make sure that you're doing the techniques, wax on, wax off correctly. Highly recommend read this as the scores. All right, first piece of new math. Summation. So summation of scores, super common in statistics. You'll be amazed how many statistical moves and techniques start with taking stuff and adding it all up. And that's what summation is. So it's symbolized by the Greek letter sigma, and that is the symbol right there. So that is sigma. That means to add together all of the scores that are after that particular, immediately after that particular symbol. So this is very important to read as the sum of. So do not read this as sigma. When you see this in your text or your homework or in class, don't read it as sigma. Read it as the sum of. And what will happen is, every time you encounter this, you'll read it as the sum of. Every time you see it, you'll read it as the sum of. So when you see this, you will read this as the sum of the scores, right? And the sum of the scores makes 100% sense. So if I gave you a whole bunch of scores, and I said, can you give me the sum of the scores? You would say, absolutely, I can add all those scores together, no problem. If, on the other hand, before I explain this to you, I say, can you give me sigma x? You would look at me and say, no, I don't know what that is. Don't do that to yourself. Do not read this as sigma x. Sigma x is meaningless to our human brains. But if you get into the habit of the sum of the scores, when you see this, you will automatically say, oh, the sum of the scores. And that's very straightforward, easy to remember. All right, so that is your first piece of new math. That sigma is the sum of. It means add it all up. So if you see the sum of the scores, what that means is you take all the scores and you add them all up. That's that notation. All right, so that's half of the new math for this semester done. Let's complete it. Let's do the second half. The sum of affects your order of operations because the sum of, this sigma symbol, it has, you can think of it as it gets VIP status as addition. So it's like addition, but it's a little special. It's like addition, but it's a little extra. It's like addition, but it gets that VIP status. So in your order of operations that you've encountered before, you know that in a lengthy formula, you want to start with whatever's in the parentheses. That's the things that you need to do first. Then you do whatever has exponents, right? That's your second move. You take care of all the exponents. Then you take care of any multiplying or dividing, and importantly, you have to do that left to right. You have to do that like you're reading the equation. You start off at the left and you do all the multiplication and division as you encounter them. I'm mentioning this because I have seen that some students have a tendency to do all the multiplication first and then the division. That's wrong. That's not correct. That's not the convention. Do multiplication and division as you encounter them from left to right. Then you do summation. So typically right here is where you would do addition. But remember that summation is like addition, but it's VIP. It gets to go first. So after multiplying and dividing from left to right, then you sum anything that has the sum of this summation sigma symbol. And then once you're done with that, you get to do any addition and subtraction, once again going from left to right. So let's take a look at that in a formula here. So if you were given this formula to calculate, what you would want to do is, again, as soon as you have more than one operation, take a moment, stop, and ask yourself, what's the order? What do I need to do first? So in this formula here, we have the sum of the scores minus 1, all of that to the exponent 2, divided by 7 times 2 minus 1. What do we do first? Well, the first thing we do is whatever's in parentheses. So we would have to do the scores minus 1. And this is a good time to mention that what this means, when you see the scores minus 1, what that means is you go to every single score and you take away 1. So you take away 1 from every single score. So if there's 20 scores there, you're going to take away 1 from every single score. That's what the scores minus 1 means. Once you're done what's in parentheses, you then do exponents. So this is the scores minus 1 to the exponent 2. So you would take the scores minus 1. You would take 5'2" minus 1, and then you would take that answer and square that. So in your order of operations, remember that you're always starting off from where you just left your values, right? So if you did the scores minus 1, you square those scores minus 1. You don't square the scores, you square the scores minus 1. After that, you do any multiplication or division from left to right. So the first thing you do is divide by 7. So each of the scores that just got -1, just got squared, they are now each divided by 7. And then whatever that result is, that result then gets multiplied by 2. So make sure that you do that in the correct order. And then, and this is where 90% of the errors in order of operations occur, once you're done with multiplication and division, then you do summation. So don't get tricked by the -1. It's sitting right there. It's like the next thing that you see. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for that trap. Make sure that you do the summation first before any other addition and subtraction. It's got its own special symbol. It gets to go first. When you sum with the summation symbol, you take everything that you've just done to your scores, and then you add up all the scores. So this is when you go from having 20 separate scores, for example, down to one massive, huge sum. And then once you're done with the summation, once you've added up everything, then you're finally ready to do any addition and subtraction. Then you can do your -1, and you're good to go. All right, so enough of hearing about this. Let's actually do this. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to pull up an Excel sheet, and we're going to do some of these problems in Excel. If you haven't already, the file that you're looking for is W01C2, so that's week 1 C2 practice, not the extra practice one, the practice one, Introduction to Statistics Summation. So if you haven't already, open that up, and we will check that out and see how you can use Excel to answer some of these questions. All right. So while people might be opening up that Excel sheet, I'll just explain a little bit about what we have here. So what we have here is we have 12 participants. So you can imagine that, let's keep this in an educational setting. Let's say that you were teaching children, so you graduate, you become a teacher, and you're teaching children, and you have 12 children in your class. And let's say that you measure them on their English ability, you measure them on their emotional IQ, and you measure them on their musical ability. All right, so these are 3 separate measures. So we have the X scores, which is their English ability. We got the Y scores, which is their emotional intelligence, and then we have the Z scores, which is their musical ability. So here in question number 1, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to figure out what is the sum of the X scores, what is the sum of the Y scores, and what is the sum of those Z scores. So one thing that you'll become very familiar with in the Excel homework, in the Excel practice sheets, and in your exams, I set up questions to look basically like with this format. The yellow cells, that is where your final answer has to go. So the yellow answer cells there is where your final answer has to appear. And in the practice practice sheets and in the homework sheets, you will see right below them usually, you're going to have your graded answer sheets. So you can see that in terms of getting the sum of the X scores correct, sum of Y scores, and sum of Z scores, we don't have those correct yet, right? It's not yet. So we're going to try to get that so that it says correct, but that's the general layout of how the Excel sheets are going to work. All right, so let's start with the sum of X.
Where is this link at?
This is in Canvas. You go to Files, you go to Excel Sheets, and this will be W01C2.
Well, it's not taking me to the actual Excel. You have to download it.
Let me take a quick look.
Oh, okay. It wasn't. I see.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And also make sure you enable editing so that you
Okay.
can. Yep. All right. So back to the Excel sheet. Okay. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be your first learning about what Excel can do. And Excel is wonderful at doing the kind of calculations that we need to do for statistics. So I highly recommend if you, and this is another one of my make sure you're waxing off and waxing off like this recommendations. When you learn a skill in Excel, try to use it for every single thing that you do in this course as much as possible. So an example of this is, we're going to learn about summation today. In your homework for chapter 1, you're going to be asked to sum some scores. Those scores, they're probably going to give you 5 scores to sum. And it will probably be faster for you to just take out your cell phone, open your calculator app, put those 5 scores in, and just add them up. I'm asking you and recommending, do it in Excel. Get that practice in Excel, get that repetition going, so that when we're using Excel, for example, for the exam, you're going to be very glad that you developed those skills to add up to 20 scores quickly, rather than taking your chance with your cell phone app. All right, so how do we do this? So let's go down to where that little sum of symbol is. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to type in equals. The equal symbol is your way of telling Excel that you're going to give it a formula. So this is your way of alerting Excel that I'm about to give you a formula. And the formula we're going to use is rather straightforward. It's just called sum. So we want to sum a whole bunch of numbers. So we're going to use the sum formula. Now, one of the things I like about the newer versions of Excel is that when you type in a formula, it'll give you a list of possibilities, right? It'll try to guess, well, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And when you highlight one of them, it will give you the description of what that formula does. So this is very helpful, especially in the early going when you're learning these, to kind of reinforce that you're doing this correctly. So we see here it goes, it adds all the numbers in a range of cells. That's exactly what we want to do. So we got the right formula. So we type in sum, that names the formula. Open parentheses, so shift 9 if you're using the keypad, open parentheses, that lets Excel know that you're about to give it numbers, right? That lets Excel know that you're about to load up this formula with numbers. And then the way that we need to do this is we need to select all of the scores. And there's a number of different ways to select these. I like to just click and drag. But you select all of the scores, close your parentheses, hit enter, and it sums up your scores. All right, so just one more time. I'll show you this on the X scores. Equals, sum, open parentheses to let Excel know that you're going to give it those scores. Highlight the X scores, so we want to highlight all of those X scores. We close our parentheses, we hit enter, and Excel has summed all of these X scores. The sum is 518. The last thing that we need to do is we need to get that sum of 518. First off, does everybody have 518? All right. Last thing we need to do is we need to get that sum of 518 up to this X score up here, up to this answer cell. For this, I highly recommend use the equals function. Put equals into that yellow answer cell, highlight where your answer is, and hit enter. And the 2 reasons you want to do this are the following. Number 1, whenever you're doing statistics, you want to carry as many decimals as you can throughout your entire calculation. The more you round, the more you introduce the possibility of getting an answer that is further and further away from the truth. So if you manually type in what you see as your output in Excel, you're going to be dropping decimal places all over the place. And this can lead to a snowball effect that changes your entire answer. So I'll give you an example from physics where this happened, from computer modeling. Has anybody ever read up on chaos theory? Okay, probably not. Has anybody ever heard of the butterfly effect? The idea that, you know, a butterfly flaps its wings in Africa and we have a tornado in Texas. So that came about because this scientist was working on a weather simulation machine. And that scientist had a whole bunch of parameters that he could input into that weather simulation machine. And those parameters had like 8 decimal places to them. So he would put in parameters, put in parameters, put in parameters. And he had this one set of parameters, and they always led to a sunny day. He would put in the parameters, it would be a sunny day. He would put in the parameters, sunny day. Did it 20 times in a row, sunny day. He put it in one time, but he didn't put in all the decimals. He cut off the decimals. Remember, just the decimals, right? Just the little itty bits at the end, and he ended up with a tornado. So small differences at the beginning can snowball into huge differences at the end. So that's one of the reasons why we want to use this equals function. The other reason we want to use it is because we want to remove as much human error as possible out of these calculations. So in psychology, we are dealing with people's lives, right? We're dealing with their mental health. We're dealing with their very selves, right? We're dealing with their minds, their selves. So we can't mess around and just sort of do things so-so, right? Psychology is not something that you do so-so. And you might think to yourself, well, no, I'm very exact, I'm very detail-oriented. And I have seen students who think that they were very detail-oriented and are, eventually make the mistake of, instead of putting in 518, they put in 581. And yeah, it's not a big deal in this situation here. Yes, if you put in 581, I could probably infer that you actually do have the skills in order to sum these scores. However, we're getting you ready for the real world. And in the real world, if you need to give somebody medication and the dose has to be 518 and you give them 581, there are massive repercussions. So in this course, we are going to start practicing being as exact as we can. So use that equals function to pop it in. And then if you scroll on down, you can see that we have the sum of the x scores correct. All right, so let's do that a couple more times with the y score and the z scores. If you want to work ahead, feel free, but I'll just do it a few more times so everybody can see it. So once again, if we want to sum up the y scores, equals sum, open parentheses, you highlight all the scores, close those parentheses, and we see that we have a sum of 678 for the y scores. Pop it in with the equals function, scroll on down, and we see that we got that one correct as well. And then finally for the z scores, equals sum, open parentheses, highlight those scores. We got 716, pop that in with the equals function, scroll on down, and we got that one correct as well. All right, I don't hear a lot of typing, so I'm assuming most of you have those 3 numbers and it's all good. Does anybody not have those 3?
Can you show how to do the equal function?
Sure. So the equal function, when you don't follow with a formula, is just letting Excel know to make this cell equal to some other cell. So you just click on you put in equals, and then you click on where your answer is, and then you hit enter, and that'll tell Excel to make this cell equal to that other cell. And as I mentioned before, Excel will carry as many decimal places as possible. So once again, we get the most exact answers, and we get to the truth without factoring in or adding in unnecessary variability. All right. So while it seems like everybody else is good to go, let's move on to the next let's move on to question number 2 here. All right, so question number 2, now we're going to get into some of these order of operations here. So we want the sum of, in parentheses, the scores minus 1. Again, not sigma in parentheses x minus 1. The sum of, in parentheses, the score minus 1. We want the sum of the scores squared. We want the sum of 2 times the scores. And we want the sum of the scores minus 1. So those are the 4 that we're going to be working on to sort of end this demo today. So let's get going on that first one. So anytime you have more than one operation, like we do in this situation here, always ask yourself, what's the order of operations? What do I do first? In this case, it's parentheses. So we are going to choose a column and we're going to label it with our next move. So that's the first thing you want to do, label your column with your next move. You will be, if you don't label your columns, you will be amazed at the human mind's capacity to forget what you just did. So don't kid yourself and say to yourself, well, I'm going to remember that's the scores -1. Write it down, whatever you need to kind of jog your memory, scores -1. Here's another example of the practice aspect of this course. I know for a fact that all of you here can take 1 away from a number, all right? So I know that you could probably just go down this line and go 55, 34, 70, 89, but I don't want you to do that for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're developing our skills, so let's make sure that we're practicing that at every opportunity. Number 2, invariably at some point, it might be after the first 100, it might be after the first 200, it's going to happen where you're going to be like 15 minus 1 is 14, 55 minus 1 is 54, 21 minus 1 is 22, 5 minus 1 is 4. You're going to make a mistake. We're humans, that's what we do. So don't let that happen. Don't introduce that error, right? Don't put those people that depend on us at risk. What we're going to do is we're going to use formulas to do this. So we're going to put in equals, and we're going to highlight the cell that has the score in it, and we're just going to put -1, and we're going to let Excel do the -1 for us. So we're going to go equals, highlight the score, -1, we hit enter, and it calculates that out for us. So one more time, equals, highlight the score, -1, hit enter, and it calculates it out for us. And the reason you want to do this is, number 1, it'll help you practice and solidify these skills. Number 2, in the coming classes, I will show you how to speed that up a little bit so that you can use Excel to do repetitive things very quickly, which is another thing that Excel is very, very highly used for. All right, so get all your -1s in. I'll give you a couple of moments to do that. I'll wait until keyboards quiet down. All right, so I'm starting to notice silence. So if you haven't finished yet, just, continue to work on that. But let's move on to the next step here. So once again, we finished what was in parentheses. We did the scores -1 for all of the scores. The only other thing that's left is the summation. So now we, again, sum what we just finished with. All right, so we're not summing the original scores. We're summing the scores -1. So down here we can put in equals, sum, the formula we were just using, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close your parentheses, hit enter, and we get a sum of 506. Pop that into our answer cell with your equals function. So put in equals, highlight where your answer is, and we can see we got that one correct. All right, next one, we are doing the sum of the scores squared. So once again, multiple operations, we need to ask what's the order, so we check. Parentheses aren't any, so we go to step 2. Exponents, there is to the exponent 2. So we're going to start a new column, and we're going to have the scores squared. All right, so you can label it whatever it is that's going to jog your mind. That's good enough for our human brains. And what we're going to do is we're going to once again let Excel do the squaring of these. So we're going to use the equals. We're going to highlight where the original score is. So that's another thing to make sure that you're doing. We're not using the scores -1. That was the previous question. We're going back to the original scores. It's a new question. We go back to the original scores. we want to raise that to the exponent 2. And there's a couple of ways to do this in Excel, but the one that I like is to use the little upwards arrow. So that's on Shift 6. That's the symbol for exponents in Excel. We raise it to the exponent 2. We hit enter, and that is 56 squared. So once again, equals, highlight your score, Shift 6 lets Excel know that you're going to give it an exponent. Tell it what exponent it is, raise it to the exponent 2, hit equals. 35 squared is 1,225. One more time, equals, highlight your score. Shift 6 gives us the exponent, raise it to the exponent 2, and we get 5,041 is 71 squared. And once again, coming soon, I'm going to show you how to do it super quick so that you can do repetitive tasks very quickly and take advantage of all of Excel's power. All right, I can hear a little bit of a slowdown with the keyboard, so if you haven't finished yet, keep working, but to just finish this problem here, we have the sum of the scores squared. We have just done exponents, we've squared all the scores. Now all that's left is the sum of. So once again, it's the sum of whatever we left off with. So we're going to sum up those scores right there. Whoops, not going to go that far down. We're going to sum up those scores right there. So once again, equals sum, open parentheses, highlight the scores squared, close those parentheses, and we get 32,654. We're going to pop that into our answer cell using the equals function, and we scroll on down and see we got that one correct. All right, next one. We got 2 more to go. Next one is the sum of 2 times the scores. So once again, multiple operations, ask yourself, what's the order? We do parentheses first, no parentheses. We then do exponents, no exponents. We then do multiplication and division from left to right. There's multiplication. So you might be, if you're unfamiliar with the lack of a multiplication symbol, if you see 2 and x next to each other, that means multiply the scores by 2. So that's what we're going to do up here. We're going to do 2 times the scores. So in Excel, once again, you put in equals. Once again, make sure you're highlighting the original score. Okay, we got a few columns now, so the chance of random error is increasing, but we highlight the original score. And then the symbol for multiplication in Excel is the asterisk. So we put the asterisk, we type in what we want Excel to multiply it by, and 56 times 2 is 112. So we do it again for the next score, so equals, highlight the score, Shift 8 is where the asterisk is on most keyboards, multiply that by 2, and 35 times 2 is 70. All right, one last time, we highlight the original score, 71, asterisk 2, and 71 times 2 is 142, and coming soon, we'll learn about that move. Incidentally, if you already know that move, feel free to use it if you so desire. All right. So let's get all those scores multiplied by 2. All right, I sense a slowdown in the typing noises. All right, so we've multiplied all the scores by 2. Nothing else to do except the summation symbol. So we go to equals, sum, highlight all those scores, multiplied by 2, close the parentheses, and we get 1036. We pop that into our answer cell here, scroll on down, and we see that we got that one correct as well. All right, last one here. The sum of the scores minus 1. So I include this one, and I'm going to point it out because in order of operations, this is by far the biggest error that students make when they're introduced to the summation symbol. And what often happens is they forget that summation is done before any addition and subtraction. Summation has special status. It's got VIP status. It goes first. And what the tendency is to treat this question right there the same as that question right there. And you do the sum, you do the scores minus 1 first, and then you sum them. This is completely different. This is the sum of the scores first, and then minus 1 from that sum. Okay, so the reason that I'm making a big deal about this is, for one, this is where most errors occur. So be aware of it, put a little red flag or a little note for yourself. Summation goes first before any other addition or subtraction. I don't know what it is about this, but students fall for it every single semester, and I'm hoping we'll get through one semester where nobody gets into that pitfall. But it's the typical error that's done here. The other reason that I'm pointing this out is because in statistics is one way to think about it is it's a way of modeling our universe. All right, statistics is a way of saying the world is out there, behavior's out there, minds are out there, and we're going to model it somehow using numbers. And if you do that, if you do that with statistics, if you do that with computer programming, if you do that with physics, it is amazing in our universe how much minus 1 pops up. So it is like just something that happens over and over and over again. So I'm making a big deal about this. The second reason is because you will see minus 1 in this course a bunch of times. You will see minus 1 in any sort of mathematical attempt to understand the world a bunch of times. I don't know what it is about our universe, but it loves minus 1. So be aware of that, get ready for it. It's going to be there a lot, and don't fall for the trap. So in this situation, we approach it like every other question so far. Multiple operations, what do we do first? There's no parentheses. Next would be exponents, no exponents. Next would be multiplication and division. Left to right, no multiplication, no division. Next is summation. So for this one here, the move is we have to sum the scores first. All right, so the first move is sum the scores because it gets special privilege. Summation goes first. So we sum the scores and we get 518, and then that gets subtracted by 1. So we can do that directly into the answer cell here if just to save space. So we put in equals, we highlight the sum of the scores, which is 518. From that we subtract 1, and we get 517. We scroll on down, we see that that's correct. All right, so notice the sum of the scores minus 1 is 517. The sum of, in parentheses, the scores minus 1 is 506. Very different numbers, right? We need to make sure that we're doing order of operations in the correct order. It's much like speaking a language. You got to put the words in the correct order because John bit the dog is a lot different than the dog bit John, right? Two completely different meanings, two completely different numbers. We got to do it in order. All right, so that was the in-class demo for that. Just a couple of things to that I'll mention. There's other practice questions on this particular Excel sheet. So I would just want to say that if you can do this question right here, then you are in very good standing. That's a very good place to get to at this stage of this course. So try this one out. If you can get to that, that's a very good sign. You're basically a little bit further along than you need to be at this point. And then there's also practicing summation and order of operations with multiple sets of scores. So sometimes you're going to take one set of scores and subtract another set of scores from it. Sometimes you're going to take one set of scores and divide it by another set of scores. So that's what we're doing in these practice ones here. So again, it's the same idea, the sum of, in parentheses, the x scores minus the y scores. And when you see x scores minus y scores, that means that you take the x score and you subtract from it the y score for every single score. So you would do 56 minus 90, 35 minus 22. So for each participant, you do that particular operation. If you see the x scores and the y scores together without a symbol between them, that means multiplication. All right, so you got some practice for that as well. And again, if you can get to this, you are way further along than you actually need to be. And just so that you know, there is one additional extra practice for this as well. So if you're not quite there, if you're not quite feeling frisky enough to try some of those harder ones, just know that there is another Excel sheet that has some of the more beginning stages of this so that you can practice it, so that you can try some of the more advanced stuff. All right, so those can all be found again in the Canvas files, in Excel files. So once again, you have the practice files, you have the extra practice, introduction to statistics, and a couple of more things before we wrap it up for today. I want to make sure that everybody is aware and everybody remembers this. The pre-tests are very important. It's important to give them a shot. It's important to try them out. They're part of that, sanding the floor, wax on process that we're going through here. But I do understand that you might struggle with the pre-tests. You might not be able to get those questions correct. So put in your practice, give them a try, give them an honest try. But if you've been sitting there and it's your 10th attempt at a question and it's still not making any sense, I don't want you to get burned out on the pre-test. And I also don't want them to negatively impact your grade. That's not the point of the pre-test. So to counter that, those potential challenges for the pretest, there is a backup option if you cannot get 100% on your pretest, and that is the MyMathLab study plan. So the study plan is a feature of MyMathLab where you can earn mastery points. And the way that this works is that if you go to the study plan and it has recommendations, it will let you know what you need to practice. So for example, in chapter 1, it'll let you know what you still need to practice. And importantly, it has these mastery points. And what I'm going to do, and different chapters have different numbers of mastery points, but what I'm going to do is I will take the maximum score of your pretest or your mastery points. And that will count for your official pretest grade. So if you get 100% on your pretest, awesome, you've earned all the points. Good for you. Do the mastery points anyway, they're good practice. But let's say that you're struggling with a particular pretest and you only get 50%. What you can do is you can go into that chapter, complete the mastery points, and when you earn 3 out of 3 mastery points, I will change your 50% grade on that pretest to 100%. So whatever the mastery points are at the end of, by the time the exam rolls around, that's what your pretest is that's what your pretest score is going to be. So definitely do the pretest, try them out, struggle with them, work with them, but don't let yourself get frustrated and don't worry about, oh my gosh, I'm not getting the pretest, this is going to impact my grade. It will not. You have that backup plan. You can do the mastery points and still earn 100% on that. All right, so other than that, we did a lot of stuff today. That is it for today. So again, check into the MyStatLab, do the MyLab tutorial so you know your way around watch the video on developing a mindset, get that pretest number 1 in the books, and if there's any questions, let me know. But other than that, we're done for today.